It does appear, doesn't it, that Russia is consolidating its position, or the pro-Russian forces are, at least in eastern Ukraine.
It does, and this is the question for all of us now. How long do we tolerate this? It's all part of a wider Russian strategy. They have been intimidating the smaller countries in the Baltic states. They've got their base in Kaliningrad there. They're in the Balkans, with Republika Srpska. They're in the South Caucasus, still with troops in Georgia, creating a client state in Armenia. They've annexed Crimea. Now they're destabilizing the eastern part of Ukraine. How long do we wait to react to that?
Ukraine, of course, is not a member of NATO, and there are many people who feel war-weary and who would say, well, this is not our fight, really.
Well, and a lot of people would say, OK, if we're going to make a stand, why Ukraine and why now? It's, of course, about the Ukrainians and the fact that they are facing aggression by a large neighbour with a whole range of new military hardware. But it's also about us. It's about NATO. It's about the West and our willingness to confront this. The Putin problem is basically that he still has this Soviet concept of a near abroad. In other words, that he should have a veto over the security.
He, of course, says it's the European Union that wants to expand eastwards.
Well, you see, it's not an expansion, because in NATO, sovereign free countries were able to join NATO if they wanted and if they met the political and military criteria. So the Cold War was about whether free countries should be able to exercise self-determination, and that's exactly what's at stake here. It is not for Russia to tell its neighbours what they can and cannot do. Free countries must be allowed to determine their own destiny for themselves.
So does that mean being prepared to fight, or does it mean providing lethal supplies to the Ukrainian forces?
Well, we know that the Russian separatists now have a whole range of new weapons. They've got new armoured vehicles. We know that they've got a lot of drones. We know that they've got very good, secure communications. So the Ukrainian forces are largely sitting ducks. That's why they've been able to make such big advances. That's why the casualties have been so high on the Ukrainian side. And I think that we have to ensure that the Ukrainians have what they need to defend their own territory. They are not the aggressors here. And we have to try to even this up, because while NATO conduct normal exercises, the Russians are using the front line in Ukraine to test new weapon systems, including the sort of anti-aircraft system that brought down the Malaysian aircraft.
The Ukrainian economy is in a terrible state, so this is effectively giving them military aid.
It's giving them some of the equipment they will need, specifically unmanned aerial vehicles, specifically anti-tank capability, and specifically very good quality secure communications. We will also have to give them training, because giving equipment's not enough. You have to give a capability. And it's also saying to Russia, you know, you cannot keep destabilising countries on your borders. It is now threatening Europe's wider security interests.
Were you puzzled that there wasn't an outcome from the meeting between Angela Merkel and President Obama yesterday? I mean, Americans appeared to be saying they're in favour of arming, and he appeared to row back from that.
Well, I think there's an intention here to send clear signals to Moscow that unless they come up with a ceasefire that's verifiable, sustainable and long-term, then there will be a reaction from the West to help the Ukrainians. I actually think that there's a case for helping the Ukrainians anyway, because the ceasefire that we last saw in Minsk back in September wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Putin went back on every word that he gave, and the question really has to be asked now, if he gives agreement to another ceasefire, is it worth anything at all? And should we not now, in the light of that, in the light of the aggression, in the light of the annexation of Crimea, be willing to help the Ukrainians?
Isn't the truth, though, that the West effectively gave Putin the green light, in as much as, both in terms of politically with the European Union and militarily with NATO, the West decided they would only offer association agreements, they wouldn't offer full membership as they did with a lot of the other Eastern European nations?
Well, of course, they would have to earn those full membership. They would have to have the political structures in place, the legal structures in place.
Basically, Georgia and Ukraine don't bother applying, and what happened? They were invaded by Russia. I
think there's an element of that. I also think it goes actually further than that, Adam, because I think that when the Russians had a cyber attack on Estonia, which is a NATO member, we did nothing. They cut off Ukraine's gas before, which was against the treaty. They invaded Georgia. They still have troops on Georgian sovereign territory. And through all of those things, and then through his ally Syria using chemical weapons on its people, we had red lines and didn't react. And I was in Washington recently, and a senator said to me, I think Putin has misread the signals. I said, well, I think he has read them perfectly. He prods us, we don't respond, and he takes another step forward.
So Philip Hammond says a small-scale conventional war. Are you predicting this is going to become a larger-scale conventional war?
Well, the ball is in Russia's court. This is a crisis that was made in the Kremlin by Putin. It could easily be resolved by Russia removing its forces, removing its weapon systems from the pro-separatist rebels, and actually undertaking a genuine peace deal. But it does not look to me as though Putin is serious in that, and that bodes ill for us all in the future, unless we're willing at some point to make a stand. And the later we choose to make that stand, the higher the price is going to be.
Dr. Fox, thank you.